Yes, it's on there. Yeah. Okay, good. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another Alkebulan Awakening series. My name, as always, is Oladile. I'm the co-founder of Emerging Alkebulan. And what we do on this platform, for most of that followers, we're here to decolonize our minds and awaken our consciousness. Unduku.
Habari gani, karibuni, asanteni kwa kuwa nasi leo. Thank you all for being with us today. Again, the name is Nduku. I am the host on Kumbukeni. As you can see, I have my hyphen there, getting ready to write Kumbukeni host, but hey, technology took over. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. It's great to have different perspectives, and I'm looking forward to this perspective and us chopping up, especially with everything happening now in Central Africa, but generally in Africa. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Welcome.
Thank you. And as you can all see, we've got Vijay Prashad. I'm going to let him introduce himself. But the topic today, we've got two topics. We're going to go for one, but we might as well go for both because they're kind of interlinked. And the topics are the Congolese fight for their own wealth, and neoliberalism has wielded corruption to privatize life in Africa. Okay. Vijay, if you want to introduce yourself and just please go straight into the topic for us. For those who are watching and listening, as always, if you have any questions, any thoughts that you have, please put them in the chat. Once we're done with the presentation, then we're going to basically go to town and just break it down and just, ask Vijay the questions. Vijay, welcome to our session, sir.
Well, no, it's a great pleasure to be with you. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me. Thanks for putting up with me and so on. I'm the director of Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. We build knowledge alongside movements on the continents of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. We have a Pan-African network on the African continent that helps us understand people's struggles, people's culture, and so on. And we try to build as much knowledge and information as we can. It's available for free on our website at thetricontinental.org. In the Pan-African page, this particular month, we're highlighting a very good newsletter from Blaise Tulo, who is from the Socialist Movement of Ghana. And this is about the election in Ghana, how to understand it, what to think about it, and so on. I think it's a very good newsletter in my view. So I welcome people to come and read our material today. Largely, I'm going to be talking from two pieces that we've done, monthly dossiers, one of them on the Congo. The Congo is, as most people, I think, already know, one of the richest places in the world. $2 trillion plus US dollars worth of minerals and metals, plus an enormous amount of arable land that could produce enough food to feed the African continent. Africa doesn't need to import food. The Congo itself has sufficient arable land. Also, it is a major lung to breathe the carbon that we put into the atmosphere. It has vast forests and so on. A really remarkable part of the planet Earth, what is now called the Democratic Republic of Congo, but in fact, the whole Great Lakes region of Africa, all the major lakes that are there in the center of Africa that connect Uganda, Kenya, the DRC, and so on. That region is extremely important to the world. And as I said, one of the richest countries in the world. Now, it also happens to be one of the places where the per capita income is one of the lowest in the world. And this is the classic problem, is the DRC is not a poor place. It's not poor. The people are not poor. This is an error. This is the classic colonial error to say that, Africa is poor, or India is poor, or, Brazil is poor. These are not poor countries. They are rich in various resources. They're also rich in human capacity, but there is a structure that effectively steals from the people their very wealth. They are not able to control their wealth. And that is the reason why, not only in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but in many African countries, this lack of sovereignty that the people have been able to exercise on their country, which goes back to the time when European conquest begins, the lack of sovereignty over their lands is actually the reason why these are rich countries with a population that just doesn't have an income. I mean, let's go back to the DRC. That region of the world was owned personally by King Leopold II of Belgium. He didn't own this on behalf of his kingdom. He owned it personally. It was his personal place. It's 60 times the size of Belgium. And he owned that personally. They just looted the wealth. They barbarized the people. They killed over 6 million people to terrorize them into fear so that they would work the land, produce rubber and so on for, King Leopold II and later for the Belgian government. Belgium, if you go there today to Brussels, Ostend and so on, those beautiful buildings in Belgium, they are all made by Congolese labor and the stolen wealth of the Congo. I mean, Belgium should actually unite with the Congo and should become a colony of the Congo today, just to give back what it has stolen. When in Belgium people say, well, we don't want these immigrants to come there. Well, if you don't want the immigrants to come there, send the money back. Send the money back. Send the wealth back. Then the immigrants won't come. We are just coming to claim our wealth back. So this theft of wealth produced a trade union movement in the Congo. Very strong national movement developed, led by Congolese people. This movement produced a number of leaders, among whom was Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba was one of the tallest leaders on the African continent. In fact, he befriends Kwame Nkrumah in Accra, Ghana in 1957 at a conference that Nkrumah organized to bring together the forces of, Pan-African socialist politics. And it's in Accra that Lumumba meets Nkrumah, he meets Frantz Fanon, he meets other important figures in the Pan-African socialist, unity, consciousness world. He meets them in Accra. Then Nkrumah begins to treat Lumumba as his mentor, mentee. He starts to mentor him, in effect, teaching this young man what it's going to mean to lead a country the size of the Congo, a vast country. Lumumba leads his movement very well. In fact, he is able to overthrow Belgian colonialism. At the handover ceremony, with the King of Belgium in presence, Lumumba gives an incredible speech in which he has one line, which I would like you to remember. He says to all the people assembled, mainly to the Congolese people, but also to the King of Belgium, he says, "We are no longer your monkeys." He says, "We are no longer your monkeys." This is like what Thomas Sankara does 30 years later in what was then Upper Volta, when Sankara changes the name from Upper Volta, which is a ridiculous colonial name. Who names a country the other side of a river? It's a ridiculous name. He changes the name to Burkina Faso, the land of upright people. The land of upright people. We are not your monkeys, says Lumumba. The Belgians were very angry. Very shortly afterwards, the United States government, the British government, and the Belgian government collude with elites in the Congo, including Joseph Mobutu, to overthrow and kill Patrice Lumumba. Not only did they kill him, they dissolved his body in acid. They took souvenirs of his teeth and took it back to Brussels. Joseph Mobutu comes to power. He thinks he can con the people of the Congo. He changes his name to Mobutu Seko Seke, changes the name of the country to Zaire, Africanizes the colony. He pretends that he can fool the people, that if he calls it Zaire now, they'll think it's a free country. In fact, Joseph Mobutu, now Mobutu Seko Seke, was working for intelligence agencies of the West allowing the wealth of the Congo to be taken out. When eventually Mobutu was overthrown and democracy was a possibility, when Joseph Kabila and others who had been revolutionaries, friend of Che Guevara, tried to build some sort of democratic system in the 1990s, a war breaks out. What? Where does this war come from? A war breaks out. There's a genocide in Rwanda. A war breaks out in the Great Lakes region. Millions of people killed. That genocidal situation in Rwanda, it's not just ethnic, it's about class, it's about imperialism, spills into the Congo. As we speak now, the M23 rebel group backed by the Rwandan government, it's called M23, it's named March 23, 2009, the day of a peace agreement. The M23 rebel group backed by Rwanda has taken the city of Goma in the eastern DRC. It is moving towards the capital of South Kivu province. That rebel force, 700 people dead, a small number compared to the millions who have died in this Great Lakes war, that's been there across the Great Lakes region of Africa. Meanwhile, big companies, Glencore, based in Switzerland, big mining companies from around the world, have been leeching the Congo, which is not able to establish its sovereignty, leeching the country of its rightful wealth, the coltan, which is used in our cell phones, the copper, the diamonds, all of that just stolen out of the Congo. I've been to the border between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. Trucks just drive across. Nobody's checking them, carrying raw materials. And accountancy firms lie on behalf of capitalism. For instance, the price of coltan on Congolese soil is X amount of euros. The moment it crosses the border into Uganda, miraculously the price increases. And they do that so that they don't have to pay the Democratic Republic of Congo a higher amount of royalty. You see, if the price was deemed to be higher in the DRC, the royalty payment is higher. But instead, they underprice it in the Congo, drive the trucks to Uganda, drive it to the port, take it off, goes all around the world to be processed. Yeah. Eventually, it's in your phone. The phone is so expensive. But the Congolese miner, the person who's mining the coltan, often children, paid nothing. Violence is what greets them. This is the structure of imperialism today. You can't understand what's happening on the African continent unless you understand this. You'll read the Western media. They will say, well, there is a fight happening in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, in Goma, this rebel group is there. And then they will get into an ethnic soup. They will say Tutsis, this, that, and the other. They would like us to believe that these fights taking place are ancient fights among the African people who are tribal. And because they are tribal people, they are settling tribal scores. This is not true. This is not some ancient tribal warfare happening, whether it's in the DRC or it's in Nigeria. These are not tribal conflicts. This is a very racist, wrong approach. Of course, there are ethnic tensions and ethnic divisions and so on that play into it. But that's not the root cause. It may play into it, but it doesn't define it. I'm not saying there's no ethnic issue involved, but the ethnic issue isn't the core of the conflict. It gets drawn into the conflict. It is secondary. It is not the primary issue. The primary issue is the impossibility for any African democracy to be created today. And let me just say this again. Impossibility of any African democracy. No African country right now, except a few that I'm going to name in a minute, no African country right now is able to exercise sovereignty, except and this is important, except 3 countries in the Sahel region have had popular coup d'etats. It's again important to say against the Western media that the coups that took place in Burkina Faso, led by Ibrahim Traoré, in Mali and in Niger, in the Sahel region of Africa, just under the Sahara, these were not coups that were initiated from the military camp. There were mass public demonstrations against the presence of the French in these countries, fighting so-called Al-Qaeda, fighting so-called ISIS. We can talk later about this so-called ISIS because just 24 hours ago, Mr. Trump claimed to attack so-called ISIS in Somalia. The French intervened in 2013. They created the problem because they destroyed Libya in 2011. Then they intervened. There were mass demonstrations against the French presence. The military acted to basically support the mass demonstrations on the streets. Now these 3 countries have very bravely created the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES. They have walked out of the imperialist-controlled ECOWAS bloc, the Economic Community of West African States.
They did a few days ago.
They did a few days ago. Meanwhile, very interesting, in Senegal, where there was also a France Dégage movement, France Dégage movement, France Get Out movement, there was also Anything is Better Than This movement. A relatively progressive government was elected, even in Senegal. In Chad and Côte d'Ivoire, the government said the French have to leave. These are not progressive governments. So there is a tendency in the African continent to see people wanting to demand sovereignty. It's not that there is no move. And in the AES, Alliance of Sahel States, they have put the word sovereignty at the front. But not in Zambia, not in the Democratic Republic of Congo, not in Kenya, not in Uganda, and so on. You know, I'm going to close up with this. Several years ago, Mr. Museveni from Uganda, who used to be a Marxist, was a student of Walter Rodney at the University of Dar es Salaam. Walter Rodney, being one of the great Pan-African scholars, wrote a terrific book called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. It's absolutely marvelous book.
One of our favorite books.
Yeah, and he was assassinated for his pains in 1980 in Guyana. Mr. Museveni made a very interesting remark about 10 years ago. He said, look, the United States has been to the moon. You know, they have a space program. The Europeans have a space program. In fact, their rockets take off from French Guyana, which is in South America. The Chinese have a space program. He says, where's the African space program? I thought this is a very good point. By the way, there was, if you don't know, there was a Zambian space program in the 1960s. A very interesting development. A good documentary was made on that. Museveni said, where is the African space program? When are we going to the moon? But then his next line is the line I want to end a little discussion with. Museveni said, we need to go there because we need to see what they are doing up there. In other words, what mischief are they getting up to? Well, Mr. Museveni, you who are creating all kinds of problems on the African continent, I would like to make a suggestion to you. Do you know, forget what the imperialists are doing on the moon. Do you know what the imperialists are doing on Earth? Are you keeping up with what the imperialists are doing in the DRC? How they have been stealing its wealth, and you have been colluding with them, allowing the DRC-Uganda border to be open, allowing the ports of Uganda to siphon out the wealth of the Congo, allowing Ugandan troops to enter into the eastern part of the DRC. Are we watching what they are doing to Africa? Or are we being misled by the BBC and allowing us to think that this is some age-old conflict that has been going on for centuries and will continue to go on because the African people are lesser than others? A racist view that the BBC constantly puts forward. What are we prepared to do? Are we prepared to fight for the truth? Or are we going to fall for their lies and be colonial captives forever? That's the question I want to leave on the table for our discussion.
Thank you very much, Vijay. Thank you very much for that. Do you want to talk about the neoliberalism stuff, or you want to leave that for later on?
Up to you. Up to you.
Let's break this down, and then we go to that, so that we do not overwhelm our people.
Okay, no problem. Okay. I know Undoku's got some, because me and her were chit-chatting yesterday about Congo, actually, and one of our brothers put some feeds out on the media talking about the conflict and obviously the Berlin Conference petition and how that fits into what's going on in the Congo. Obviously, it was basically taking people towards that side of things and ignoring the imperialist agenda. So it's basically trying to give it a balance, but it's obviously taking the whole thing away from what's really going on. So I know she was going to talk about that, but before she does that, based on what you just said to us, as an African person that's passionate about seeing Africa become what it's supposed to be, the Alkebulan, how do we break down imperialism on our continent of Africa? How do we break it down? Because it's, we've had guests talk about this every so often, and we have different people talk about different things and how we're going to do it. But as Africans, how do we get rid of imperialism? How do we get rid of because we are colonized in the head, mentally, psychologically, and physically. So how do we break it down? Where do we start?
Well, it's a couple of things. One, we should not underestimate the kind of thinking that's already on the continent. For instance, in 2016, the African Union, limited as it is, passed a resolution in the Peace and Security Council saying that all foreign military bases should be removed from the African continent. That was in 2016. That was the government's. But they didn't act on it, until the people rose up in the Sahel, in Burkina Faso and so on. And when they rose up in the Sahel and they said the French go, then even in Côte d'Ivoire, government put in by the French, the French attacked Côte d'Ivoire to put the government in. Even there, the government said, get the French base out. It's interesting, in Niger, they've said French out, but not United States. In the city of Agadez, I've seen the big giant US drone base. It's one of the largest military bases in the world.
Wow.
They have not been able to, they don't have right now the strength to say Americans have to leave, because Americans are way too powerful. So they haven't been able to say that. Then a few years ago, the governments of Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo came together and said, we have a lot of raw materials to make electric batteries for to save electricity. So the DRC and Zambia produces some of the world's best raw copper. They created a deal to say, let's build an African battery. And this was towards building an African electric car, which is super possible. Like, why not? Why not have an African electric car? The Chinese built electric cars basically from scratch. I think the company is called YDB or YRB. They built these brands by themselves. In Bolivia, the Bolivians, with some help from the Chinese, built a Bolivian electric car. Take some help technologically from the Chinese, they will transfer the technology. You've got engineers in the DRC, in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, build an electric car. When this started to happen, the United States government got involved. Mr. Anthony Blinken got involved. And they said, no, let's not just have a Zambia DRC agreement. Let's have a Zambia DRC US government agreement so that the US is involved. And, there was not enough strength in the Democratic Republic of Congo and in Zambia to tell the United States to, I don't know what words to use in the show here, but basically
they can F off.
To F off. Yeah, exactly. They didn't have the political strength. And that's what we need to produce. It's not that these ideas aren't there. People are already discussing, let's create an African car. Let's have an African monetary system. Why don't we think of an African currency? African monetary system has been on the table since 1980. The plan of Lagos, for instance, in Lagos, Nigeria, there was a very important meeting. If you're interested, people should go and read. You can find it online. The plan of Lagos, Nigeria. Yeah, read the plan of Lagos. Back in the 1980s, there was a debate and discussion, create an African monetary system, create an African monetary fund. Don't have to have the IMF. Create a sovereign wealth fund for some of the major mineral exporting countries, raise the price of minerals, create an African currency for inter-African trade and so on. Yeah, this is all on the table. It's not that we need to give ideas. It's that the governments and people don't right now have the strength fully to combat. Okay, they can combat the French, it's a weaker country, but to combat the United States, to take that tooth out, that toothache, it's sitting in there, and it's more painful to take the tooth out than to leave it there. You understand? Because if you try to pull that tooth out, what do? They kill Lumumba. They overthrow Nkrumah, coup d'etat. They overthrow and kill Sankara. Anybody who tries to stand up to the United States, dead. It's more painful to take the tooth out than to leave the tooth in. It's not that African leaders are not thinking some of these ideas. It's not that the people's movements aren't thinking them. It's that we just don't have the strength to deal with the viciousness with which imperialism has treated Africa. It's not just the coup d'etats, right? I gave you the example. Blinken's entry into the Zambia DRC conversation is a kind of economic coup d'etat. Why not allow an African battery to be built? Why should a US company get involved? That's an economic coup d'etat.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay, Vijay. Yeah, you want Nduku? Before you go, Nduku, I'm just going by what Vijay just said there. So you say we're kind of limited because of the immense power that the US has. But I'm surely there must be something that we Africans should do to actually, because we cannot carry on like this, because the longer they stay on our continent, the longer they keep looting and stealing, it's going to hold Africa down. Capitalism is holding Africa down. So there has to be a way out of this. You know, have you got any suggestions?
Well, the first suggestion is the African people have stood up in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. We have to defend those people, their struggle, you know, against the lies that want to portray them merely as military dictatorships, this, that, and the other. I mean, when Ibrahim Traore went to Ghana, to Accra, for the inauguration of John Manama as the new president of Ghana, at the big ceremony after the swearing in, heads of state went to congratulate on stage the new president. When Ibrahim Traore went up there, he got the loudest cheer from the crowd. He was a hero. And the Western press said, why was he carrying a gun? Why did they allow him to carry a gun? Because he's a gangster. We love him. We love him. But they are portraying him as a military dictator. We have to defend that process. We have to strengthen our friends in Senegal. We have to give that government strength not to give in to the IMF, because they are all people who fought. Many of them been to prison, you know, in that government. They are fighters. We have to give them strength in whatever way we can. You know, if the alliance of Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, if they succeed, Africa has a road forward. You see, a path will open. So our defense of that right now, in my opinion,
it's the biggest thing.
Is a vital. It's vital.
I agree with you. Absolutely. I agree. Okay, Nduku, the floor is yours, sis.
That was a tall order, my brother Oladele, that you just presented on Prashad's table. It's a tall order. Give us the solution to Africa, Prashad. Oh, that's a tall order. Anyway, so before I even get to my question, I'm going to make two comments. I was watching Black Panther Wakanda Forever again yesterday for the third time or the fourth time and I will watch it more and more. I said to myself yesterday, I need to keep watching this. Every time I feel like I want to watch something that is mindless, although it isn't mindless actually, I'll watch it. Why am I watching Black Panther Wakanda Forever? As much as it is a fiction movie, and there are many things about it that are not right, because he's still, and I'm guessing this is because he's doing the movie in the United States, the center of criminality, and he's not allowed by the editors and the masses that control the movie industry, without mentioning their name before they put me on their list of whatever, you know what they do. So he probably had some white man who said to him, no, you can't do it this way, you can't do this way, you know, which is why he ends up accommodating whiteness in the movie. But as much as that happened, he brought in a lot of overt and covert messages on how we should move forward. And I urge all of us to rewatch Black Panther Wakanda Forever with that mindset. Watch it as an African revolutionary to see what our brother is telling us, to see what the art, right, is telling us, because we have a lot of messages in art, in film, that we need to start taking seriously. So the CIA representative, the female representative, I just called her rep because I forget whether she was director or just a different role. She says she dreams of the day the US controls all the vibranium in the world. Because the other guy, the colonialists, as they call him, says to her, can you imagine if we're the ones who had vibranium, what we would do to the world, right? Because they're trying to portray Wakanda as savages and all that. And she says, oh, I dream of the day. I dream of the day that we do that. And that we should not just take that and walk away. We should not just take that and say, oh, I went to the movies, that was a great movie. We should seriously look at what that means. This is what the US is doing in our continent. They want to take control of all the resources in our continent. And I always say this, and we don't sit and ask, I know we do, right? Most of us do, or a good number of us do, and ask ourselves, can you imagine if Kenya, can you imagine if Burkina Faso went to the United States? And we're talking about terrorism. There's the KKK in the United States. That's a terrorist organization. So we as Africans, because the KKK terrorizes Black people, should be marking that officially as a terrorist organization and saying, oh, United States, we need a partnership with you to fight terrorism because you have a terrorist organization in your country. So we would like to have a base to help you fight this terrorist organization called the KKK. Imagine that. Because these are facts. There is a terrorist organization in the United States that terrorizes the Black community, the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. We as the Black community should be moving under that fact, under that knowledge, and saying, United States, in everything we do with them, if you want a partnership with us, you need to get rid of the KKK, as they demand of us to get rid of Al-Shabaab and ISIS because of their US interests. What are our interests? The well-being of all Wana Ubuntu all over the world, right? Even if Kenya, even if Uganda, even if Niger, whichever African nation of the 54, does not care about the descendants of Africans who were enslaved in the United States. They have current Kenyans, they have current Nigerians, they have current Zambians in the United States who are under the threat of the KKK. Like this is the mentality. And then the other thing from the movie I'd like to address is that ending. And maybe we will do a breakdown of Black Panther Wakanda Forever one of these days. And I don't know how. I'll try and reach out to the director to see what permissions I can get. Maybe play a clip each time. Let's talk about it. Play a clip. Let's talk about it. I'll figure something out. But at the end, because all of us, those of us who are revolutionaries, when we're watching the movie in the middle, we're pissed off because we're like, it should be very clear that the two of you should unite against the imperialists. At the end, our brother gives us that.
Yeah.
He gives us that. And a lot of, I don't know if we're all paying attention, right? Kul Khan at the end, when his fellow warrior comes to him, the female, and says to him, my brother, I have fought with you on many battles. I never thought I would see the day that you give in. Why did you give in to the Wakanda people? And he says, yo, chill. This is strategy. Now they see us as an ally. Now they see us as a friend. Now they have empathy for us. The Black Panther, the most powerful warrior in the world, sees us and has empathy for us. So when the white people who dream of controlling the vibranium in the world come for them, they will turn to us and we will unite and fight these white people. Because his goal has not gone away. He is still wanting to destroy the imperialist nations. But he says it seems like we need to wait until the Wakanda. For them, it is painful enough to do it, because apparently it wasn't at the moment. So this is the thing. When is it going to get painful for us, Wana Ubuntu, enough for us to stand up against these people? They are killing Congolese children. They are killing Congolese mothers. I have a friend who recently told us of and I am sorry to share this, but this is I share these stories so that I can spark that anger, that pain that is needed for us to revolutionize, for us to fight and liberate ourselves. A Somalian woman who back in the day with her mother were held back by warriors and forced to watch her father and brother literally barbecued alive. These are the stories of our people, and we still have not reacted and fought these nations. For Niger, I don't know what pressure is being put on them, and I will mention that and then I'll go to my question. For Niger to allow the biggest drone base of the United States to still continue existing, knowing what that threat is. Again, brother Prashad, you were saying that there are three sovereign nations. There are actually two, as long as Niger has that. And actually, there are none as long as Niger has that base in the United States, in Ubuntu Africa. As long as we have foreign military bases on our motherland, none of us is sovereign. None of us is sovereign. As long as we have that. And in the movie, if you all remember, when they decide we're going to go meet them in the waters, they have a ship that just pops out of the water. Remember that? They have a battleship. What is stopping us from building our battleship that is just going to pop out of the water? Because you all, Oladele is over here asking Prashad, what's the solution for Africa? War! Fighting them, killing them. That's the solution. I'm sorry. It is
But
the solution.
like Prashad said, we haven't got the military might to combat them, so we have
to work on it.
Yeah, we need to find a way.
We have to find a way to work on it. Brother Prashad, as you were talking, you mentioned, and for those of you who question, why is Duku calling Brother Prashad brother? He's not African, he's not Black. Brother Prashad is a brother in the struggle. He comes from people who have been oppressed, and therefore in that, we have alliance, and we need to unite and fight imperialists. And in that alliance, he's a brother. Make no mistake, when the Wakanda people are attacked and they go to speak to the Mayans, they will be brothers in that war against the imperialists and sisters. So this is what I'm talking about, and this is how we need to start thinking. But we have to. All the smart tech people, I don't care if you hear me speaking today and you go start doing it in a covert way, get it done. Start building the weapon that is going to be needed. We need to take down Elon Musk's satellites. They all need to come down. Those are the solutions. I'm sorry. These are the solutions for Africa. This is it. There's no sitting and negotiating. There's no, let's think about it. Oh, what could we do? Oh, no. We have to put pressure on these people so badly that they will never even think of thinking about Africa. When they think of Africa, the fear takes over their bodies. That's it. We have to instill fear in them when they think of Africa so that they cannot even dare land there without bringing humility. So let's talk about the so-called ISIS and Al-Shabaab. Let's talk about that. Because I like that, because that is where I went with that. The so-called ISIS and Al-Shabaab. And we, in return, should say and declare officially that the KKK is a terrorist group. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, actually, before I get to Al-Shabaab and ISIS, mainly ISIS, I think it's important to talk, to mention that Africa Stream, which, is based in Kenya, run by a friend of mine, Ahmed Kabalo, very, good guy, is from Sudan. His parents are remarkable people. Anyway, look, they just started to produce viral videos, and the US government went after Africa Stream. Not even hundreds of millions of views, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, not permitted. They started to lie about them, saying that it's close to Russia, this, that, and the other. And they deplatformed Africa Stream. I mean, we need to defend those voices. It's very important. That's why I'm mentioning it here. Whatever one, may have, we've got to defend them, because they come for one, they come for all. That's how they work. They shut everybody down. If you're not praising them, praising the Gates Foundation for its biocrimes in Africa, praising Elon Musk's Starlink, for stealing the ability of people where they can only get internet through Starlink and so on. Musk, Gates, these guys are biopirates. They are tech pirates and so on. They will allow them to operate, but they won't allow Africa Stream. They won't allow us to get big viewerships. We'll be shadow banned constantly, and it's not out of paranoia that we're saying this. Africa Stream actually has been deplatformed, so it's not out of any paranoia. Okay, let's go to Mozambique to best understand the Al-Shabaab story, not Somalia. In northern Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado province, which is in the very north, one of the poorest parts of Mozambique, just off the coast, there was a discovery of natural gas, large amounts of natural gas just off the coast. Two oil and gas companies came together because they had a deal with the government of Mozambique, and that was Exxon of the United States and Total of France. They came together to develop the oil and the gas field. From Cabo Delgado, from the coastal region, you can see the gas rigs, and on the coastline there are huge complexes of Total and Exxon. They have enormous amounts of land where they've built gas supply, logistical things and so on. Well, protests began from the people of Cabo Delgado saying, listen, we are all really poor. We can see all this wealth happening here. None of it's coming to us. Initially, these protests were completely peaceful. Government of Mozambique sent, at the urging of Total and Exxon, I believe, this I can't prove, but they sent in the police force to thrash people. Okay, so people started to defend themselves. There were ex-police officers, a couple of ex-military people. I visited and talked to some of these people and so on. They started an operation called Al-Shabaab. Now, it's important to know that every Arabic word doesn't mean terrorist. Shabab is an Arabic word for youth. So Al-Shabaab just means the youth. So this group called Al-Shabaab was set up in Cabo Delgado, and they began to do operations to defend the protesters against the armed forces, and particularly violent attacks by the state to protect the oil and particularly natural gas fields. This Al-Shabaab group became a problem, and because it had mass popular support, it was an insurgency. The government of Mozambique tried to send the military in, could not succeed. So then they told the French, because remember, it's French Total, we can't do anything for you. The French government under Emmanuel Macron was very unhappy. They didn't want to send in French troops because there's the French getting a bad rap. So Mr. Macron went to Kigali, went to Rwanda. He also invited Paul Kagame to come to Paris, and they also met in South Africa, where they had a discussion and debate where what the Rwandans said was France has to publicly apologize for its role in the Rwandan genocide. It has to pull certain material it has in its school books. And if France does that, this is the public deal. I don't know what the private deal was. If France does that, then Rwanda is going to send 1,000 troops to northern Mozambique to crush the Al-Shabaab insurgency. And that's exactly what happened. Rwandan troops entered. It's very convenient. If you don't send in French troops. It looks like France is not intervening. But in fact, Rwanda, it's a little bit like the Kenyan police that's there in Haiti. The Kenyan police is acting in Haiti on behalf of the Europeans and the United States. It's not because Kenya. What is Kenya doing in Haiti? For God's sake, in the same way, what is Rwanda doing in Cabo Delgado? Well, they are defending the French and American assets there. They crushed the insurgency. As the insurgency began to lose steam because of the highly skilled Rwandan troops, they are they've had a lot of experience fighting in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Mr. Kagame will sue me for saying that, but I think that's now been quite well proved even by UN reports. This group, Al-Shabaab, announced we are now ISIS Mozambique. Okay, because they wanted to link up with ISIS and get some. There is nothing ISIS about them. When I was in the Sahel region and I was working in the Sahara writing reports, I met lots of people who claimed to be Al-Qaeda of the Maghreb, who were actually just cigarette smugglers. They got more power by calling themselves Al-Qaeda. People were more scared of them. These guys were cigarette smugglers. There's a lot of ISIS people in that region who are smuggling cocaine from Mali up into Europe to Marseille. They're also ISIS. There are also people amongst them that are true believers in the jihadi cause. But there's a lot of crazy people. In the case of why I'm giving the Mozambique story, because it's a tragic story. Somalia has been destroyed by Western intervention. You'll remember Black Hawk Down in Mogadishu. You could go listen to the rapper Kanan. He gives, it's a long period of destroying Somalia's fishing communities, destroying its agriculture and so on. Obviously, people are upset and angry. And in the northern part of Somalia in particular, where the droughts have been hitting hard and so on, people have been angry and part of an insurgency. The government in Somalia is unelected, by the way. So when Trump decided to launch missile strikes at the mountains in the north of Somalia, the government said, thanks for doing that. Obviously, it's an unelected government. There are no elections there. People are upset. They're angry. What ISIS in Somalia? There will be some hardcore people. I'm not denying that. There will be pockets of hardcore ISIS people. Yes, that's true. But there are also lots of people who are just upset that they can't grow things because there's no water, there's mismanagement of the state, that Somalia has been taken over by a counter-terrorism logic. There's no place to build social welfare. So ISIS, Al-Shabaab, these things are not, they are fantasies on the African continent. Boko Haram is a fantasy on the African. It's a real problem for the people in that part of Nigeria. It's a problem for people in that part of Mali, even bits of Niger and so on. It's a problem. I'm not denying it's a problem. But the root cause underneath that is not jihadism. It's that people are angry that their needs are not being fulfilled. And that's the answer to it, not bombing them over and over again to make some kind of futile points about, how powerful the US president is. Every US president that comes to office within days strikes a part of the lesser world, the other side of the international division of humanity. 3 days after Obama became president, he killed 9 family members in a village in North Waziristan, including 2 men who had just returned as workers from the United Arab Emirates, left behind 21 people, dependents. The US government paid them nothing. One 14-year-old boy lost an eye. Mr. Obama apparently was unhappy about what he had done, but he didn't stop. Every president baptizes in blood their presidency by killing darker bodies in other parts of the world. Full stop.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. The other day, Oladile, we were talking because of all the ICE raids going on in the United States now. And one of because I was saying to the Latina colleague, Hispanic, whatever the term is, you all know who I'm talking about. Let's not get caught up in technicalities. I said to them, who voted for Trump the most, right? What percentage of your people voted for Trump? But as we were talking about that, she asked me, who was the president who had the most deportations? Who was the president, now we go on, who had the most drone strikes, right? It is Obama. And I say this to say, the United States is a system. It doesn't matter if they have a frog, a literal frog sitting as president, it will still do what the system intends to do. The United States, as you are seeing now clearly, because they have people like Elon Musk who do not have the, what's it called? The sense to do things covertly. And with him, it's ego. So he has to show it forwardly. And I'm sure the other money people are really pissed off at him because he's moving this way. The money people control the United States government. It never is the president. It is the money people. It's the capitalists. And these are the people we are fighting on the continent. These are the people who are funding the mercenaries, right? What's it called? The guy who said we should recolonize Africa again, Prince, whatever his name is. But all his organizations, under all the names that he has called them every time they try to distance themselves from the crimes they commit, are run by capitalism. So they have decided that war is going to be a profitable business.
Isn't it? Yeah, it is,
right?
yeah.
War should not be a money-generating business, because as long as war is done, I've said this before, as long as war is generating money, they will always create scenarios to have war, because they have to keep sustaining, they have to have customers all the time. That's business, it's simple economics. If my business is war and I want to keep having customers, I will create the need for war so that we can continue doing business. So the issue my brother was talking about before that I wanted to talk about, and I'm glad you said this, and it's interesting because yesterday, Oladile and I were going back and forth about this, and if you look at the private chat, Prashad, I'm saying, oh, look at it, he's saying exactly what I was saying. Tribalism is not the cause. Tribalism is a symptom. So let's talk about that, right? And my concern is seeing revolutionaries like me and the brother I'm talking about, I'm not going to be specific about the name. I consider him a revolutionary. And so my question is, why is this brother pushing an imperialist propaganda topic, which is tribalism? Why? Who has gotten to our brother is my question, right? What has happened that all of a sudden he's talking like this? And I said this to the Kenyan people when they were doing the protests. Stop focusing on Ruto. Stop focusing on tribalism. Stop focusing on these little things that are symptoms of imperialism and the expansion of imperialism. They're literally symptoms. Imperialism is COVID-19. It has gotten into your body. Tribalism is the cough you're going to get, right? Corruption is the sore throat. What's the other one? What are the other topics? The healthcare system not working is a stomachache. Those are symptoms.
Food.
COVID-19 is imperialism is COVID-19. So if you want to treat COVID-19, you have to take out imperialism from the body that is our motherland. So Prashad, this is, and it's a question, but it's a guidance to you for you to speak on this. We waste a lot of energy and resources fighting the symptoms. How would you advise us revolutionaries, us Africans? Forget about revolution. You don't have to be a revolutionary to want to be liberated. You just have to be a human being on the continent who is done with it, right? Who wants to see the well-being of our people. How do we move in a strategic, productive way that does not consume us?
Yeah.
How do we directly address imperialism, which is the root cause of the problems all over our motherland?
I mean, part of it we've already talked about, which is that, we always seek a door because, nobody needs to invent the struggle. The struggle is always there. History is happening in front of our eyes. There are these doors that being pushed open. Yeah, what's happening in the Alliance of Sahel states, that's already a door. If you live in those countries, I would say you are most likely already involved in the popular protests, the manifestations, the effort to build the strength of those societies. Yeah, I say societies because the society has to strengthen in order for the state to be able to take orders from society. If you have a weak society, then you just can't dominate the elites and so on. In other countries, I think it's very important to build the capacity of people. It's important for us, to advance in the battle of ideas, to lift up stories of liberation and not allow people to be confused by stories of division. It's important to lift up the great heroes, Nkrumah, Lumumba, go all the way up to Sankara, people who tried to unite, people who wanted to build a united Africa, wanted to build a united human race. Those are the people we need to lift up, not the stories of division. You see, if we focus on the stories of violence and humiliation and the so many million killed here and people killed there and the this and the that, we don't understand that in fact liberation has its history in places like Africa. The liberation doesn't have to come from outside. The continent is not just a continent of misery and suffering. It's a continent of struggle and liberation. So in our battle of ideas, it's important for us. What can we do? You see, you're asking a question. I'm just talking about what can we do? Others will have to find their own destiny. Yeah, they'll have to find their own place. Our destiny, I would suggest, given that this is what we're doing today, right, is to lift up the stories of liberation, to put them at the forefront, to lift the capacity of people so that they feel that they come from a people of struggle. I would say, I agree with you, Wakanda, that's an interesting movie series. But, if I was right now somewhere, where people could, I would set up a film screening. I would do a series. I would show them, the great Sembene Osman's film, Emitai, about a group of women who fight off French colonialism. I would take Abdul Rahman's Sissaku's great film, Bamako. Bamako is a film which is a debate about the International Monetary Fund. Yeah? I would take Abdul Rahman Sissoko's film, Osman Sembene's films. I would take these African cinema, these voices that are lifting up liberation. It's very interesting. Sembene Osman, one of the great filmmakers of Senegal and of the continent, made a film called Camp de Thiore, which was about a true story where West African soldiers had been recruited by the French to come to fight in World War II. Yeah, they come to fight in Europe. And when they are demobilized back to West Africa, they are brought and kept in a concentration camp. And the French refuse to pay them. They refuse to release them. Sembene makes a film about this actual incident. And then they get killed, in the camp, by the way. There's a massacre. So Sembene makes a film. One of the characters in the film is wearing a Nazi helmet in the film, running around talking nonsense, but in fact telling the truth. Yeah. This last year, 2024, was the anniversary of the massacre at the Camp de Thiore. In Senegal, the government organized a very large commemoration of this event, which had been forgotten, but was remembered because of Sembene's film. Wow. And in the Sahel region, people started to talk about this betrayal of people who went and fought Europe's war. And then they were brought back, kept in a concentration camp. Nobody knows the story. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, we need in the battle of ideas to tell rich stories of the actual history of liberationary movements on the African continent. Where is Cabral in the teaching of children today? Where is the fight in Guinea-Bissau? Where is Samora Machel in the debates and discussions today. Why aren't we talking about the assassination of Chris Hani? Yeah, one of the most important people on the African continent. What about their ideas? That's our role. You see, we have a limited role. Everybody should understand where they are driving their car.
Yeah.
I can't drive my car everywhere. I need to pick a lane. Our lane is the battle of ideas. And we need to be serious, dedicated, unflinching, and not be afraid of them. We need to tell these stories, of people who fought them and in some cases won, but were then killed or overthrown. And those stories will give other people, better people than us, inspiration to lead struggles. We are limited people, okay? We can only do what we can do. Better people than us will hear these stories and go and lead the struggles. And we will sing their songs. We are griots. We sing the songs of the great people, okay?
I love that. Yeah, you know what you just said there, it basically emphasized what we need to do. Obviously, we need to re-educate people. We need to share our own stories, and our history is the most important thing, because as you well know, Vijay, in Africa, most African history is not taught. And that's intentional. They did that intentionally so that we do not know what happened in the past, because if most Africans or people around the world knew what these people do, no Caucasian feet will land in anywhere. They will basically chop their legs off. So the fact that they're not teaching their history is intentional, so that they don't know. And that's why they have religion to back it up, to make himself look superior over other people. So by superimposing their image in people's minds. So all these things are done deliberately, just to subvert and just keep people muted and docile. Yeah. I've got a question here for you. I think it's a long question. I'm going to just bring it up a little bit.
Is it from the audience?
Yeah.
Quickly before you get to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Quickly before you get to that, you mentioned Glencore based in Switzerland. So we had a Swiss one time come to our chat talking about Switzerland is not bad. Switzerland is doing this. Switzerland is not the same as the imperialists.
They're all the same. Yeah.
And you know what?
Isn't that lady in Ndoku?
Yes.
Yeah.
When you said that, I was so happy because I have read The Looting Machine, and in The Looting Machine, he mentions Glencore and the fact that it is a Swiss-owned company. Please talk about Glencore and let's get it right as to who they are.
Well, the most important thing to remember is it started out in the United States. It was founded, or may not be founded, but it was run by a man named Mark Rich, who was a convicted criminal by the U.S. courts. He flees to Switzerland, takes Glencore with him. I'm remembering all this from memory, okay?
Okay.
So I may get some of the details here and there wrong. Bill Clinton pardoned Mark Rich. That was one of his last pardons before he left office. He pardoned this criminal. Glencore now based in, I think Mark Rich is now dead. Glencore based in Switzerland is a major investor, not necessarily in mines, because companies don't like to own mines anymore. It's too much fixed investment. But it's a big investor in the value in the commodity chain of removal of minerals and metals from the African continent. So in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Glencore plays a role in the removal of these minerals and uses the advantages of Swiss cantonal law to do things like transfer payments and so on. This is what we write about in our dossier on corruption, that how the real corruption is companies like Glencore. By the way, the other day, my friend Ali Abu Nima, who runs Electronic Intifada, a Palestinian journalist, arrived in Switzerland, the same Switzerland that this person said is not imperialist, to give a series of talks about what's happening in Gaza. He was arrested by the Swiss police on the streets, violently arrested, handcuffed, thrown in prison, held there for 2.5 days, and then deported. Now, this is Switzerland. Ali Abu Nima just came to speak about what's happening in Gaza. I don't think he had yet spoken. So they arrested him violently based on something he had not yet done, which was speak about Palestine, which apparently in Switzerland is a crime. Now, who's the real criminal? Think about that. Think about that. I mean, they may make really good cheese and chocolates and so on, but they can't hide behind their cheese and chocolates and pretend that that's liberalism.
Yeah, and the irony is Switzerland is supposed to be, or we've been told that it is the neutral country.
Neutral, no, they're not neutral.
The only neutrality that Switzerland is that it's the one that cleans the dirty money. It's the one that determines the pricing. The valuing of commodities all over the world is determined in Switzerland. When you understand the power that they have, and then you have someone coming in a chat talking about we are not bad, we are doing this in Africa. Again, here's the simple truth, our people. The solution is not in the white man or white woman at all. I don't care if they are God abiding, I don't care if they understand African spirituality. No, the solution is within us. And then we will strategically have allies in our fellow oppressed people. I am going back again to the movie Black Panther, that ending. If you do not want to watch the whole movie, watch the ending. Watch it over and over and over, because I want it to be seared. This is something that is said in the Black Panther, and the little girl from the US, the scientist says to her, oh, that sounds painful. I want it to be seared in your minds, the message that is being said to you, so that you can, you start operating subconsciously on it. That's the point of repeat. Watch this ending over and over again, my fellow Africans. If you do nothing else, when you get the message that a plane has fallen in DC, you're stressed out. When you get the message that another plane in the same week has fallen in Philadelphia, you're freaking out. And just last week, we had the message that, 2 weeks ago, that Orange Man has been inaugurated. So when you're stressing about those things, turn on Black Panther, that last few minutes, and watch that again and again and again. I want this to be a message within us that starts operating. Even when we are asleep, we are thinking about it. I do not mince my words. I am not out here trying to walk cautiously on YouTube so that they don't cancel me. I am here trying to send my people messages so that they rise up. That is my goal. I'm here to educate you so that you rise up, because we need to rise up. We're not just here countering the false narrative just for the sake of countering it, or to get subscriptions, or to get followership. We want you to rise up so that we can all stop being oppressed. Okay.
Yeah, go on.
Quickly, you mentioned Congolese honey, and I know you've been in South Africa, so I want you quickly not to just pass by that. Recently, one of the media companies in South Africa gave a platform to the murderer of Chris Hani. Please speak on that. You're familiar with that story? Yes, please speak on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about this, because the issue, we need to start somewhere else, which is, firstly...
Let me be specific. Do you think they were innocent in their giving him a platform? Address that.
No. But we need to start earlier, because, you see, first, it's important to understand who Chris Hani was. Chris Hani was one of the leaders of the African liberation movement, not only in Southern Africa. Remember, the fight was not just for South Africa, it was for Southern Africa. And it was about Namibia, the so-called frontline states, and so on. Hani played a major role in the spear of the nation, the armed struggle in Southern Africa against the apartheid regime of South Africa. He was also one of the main leaders in the South African Communist Party. Very popular figure among the South African working class. Very popular in Soweto, in the various slumlands of the working class in Southern Africa. Extremely good orator, very charismatic man, and so on. Well, interesting. The government has Mandela released from prison, Mandela comes and starts a process of negotiation with other members of the African National Congress negotiating with the government of F.W. de Klerk. Chris Hani, Joe Slovo, the communists are part of this negotiation. It's very clear that had they allowed Chris Hani to live, Chris Hani would have been the left wing inside the new ANC government that was constituted by Mandela. But somebody, because this is not a one murderer. There's a man who shot Chris Hani, but people decided that Hani had to go. You see, of all the leaders in the ANC, in that period of transition, it was Hani that was assassinated. They didn't assassinate Nelson Mandela. They didn't assassinate Thabo Mbeki. They didn't assassinate anybody else among the major leadership. They killed Hani. Why did they kill Hani in 1994 at the moment of transition? Because had Hani entered government, Hani would not have allowed the peaceful transition of basically white monopoly capitalism from apartheid state to liberated state. He would not have permitted it. In 1996, Mandela's government put in place a policy called GEAR, Growth and Redistribution Act, which was effectively an austerity program for the vast number of people and protected white monopoly capital. Hani would have fought that tooth and nail, both within the Communist Party and in the ANC. And because Hani was so popular among the black working class, he would have mobilized a section of people to prevent that. So Hani was not killed by one man. Hani was killed in a criminal conspiracy that was never revealed. So by putting the man now on media, to me is just an irrelevant distraction. Because the South African government owes it to itself to investigate who killed Chris Hani. It owes it 30 years after the end of the apartheid state to tell us who killed Hani in order so that we can then understand properly why there was no resistance within the ANC alliance to the rightward drift in economic policy, which brings us to the situation in South Africa now. This is actually not a historical discussion. So by having the killer of Hani on the media without actually investigating who really killed Hani, this is putting the blindfold on South Africa, making a debate, a circus. You know, should they have him? That's why I said that, look, you can't discuss whether to have him on television or not. Whether to have him on television is a debate part of the circus. This is not the debate. The real debate is who killed Chris Hani and what was the purpose of killing him. And where has this left South Africa today? It's left South Africa today a broken country. Let's be clear.
Messed up. It's messed up.
A broken country.
Yes.
The promise of 1994 has not been realized.
Nope.
And the killing of Hani, and I don't want to say one person is important, but look, the killing of Lumumba was important. The killing of Sankara was important. So sometimes you kill a person, you demoralize a whole tendency. The killing of Hani was absolutely important for the right-wing takeover, in a way, of the new South Africa. So that when they put in place GEAR, you know, when they refused to break up white monopoly capital, all of that was possible because the critique from the left had been assassinated. So this circus now really drives me crazy because the real debate is not happening, which is who killed Hani. And we know who killed him, but we don't know their names.
Yeah. So basically a distraction. It's a distraction, basically, in a nutshell. Yeah.
And which reveals that they intentionally did it to just anger us, right? This is what they do. It's like poking us so that we can focus on that instead of what needs to be addressed. And I'm glad you said that because we are planning to do a session on it, and we will approach it in this way that you have just mentioned, instead of just the symptom again, right? The symptom again. And the government of South Africa, the current government under the ANC, will never investigate because they are involved in the killing of Hani. Some of the ANC members were involved in the killing of Hani because of the threat it posed on their position of power. So they'll never investigate it until South Africa has a government that's truly grounded on the Wana Ubuntu in South Africa, truly grounded on getting the land back, truly grounded on getting rid of the invader from their country, from their governmental structures. There's no way you should have white people who invaded your country in your government. I mean, logic is lost when you do things like that. You imagine in Wakanda, let's go back to Wakanda. Imagine in Wakanda, they partner with the US, right? The colonialist guy is there, and they start having them in the government, in the circle of elders sitting there. Imagine the disruption. This is what South Africa is literally doing. It is disrupting itself by having those who invaded its nation participate in their government. Oladele, you want to go to the audience questions, I guess. And I appreciate you so much, Prashad, for showing, for addressing what we have been, myself and my brother, struggling this week. Frustration with people focusing on symptoms instead of the root causes. This is what I'm taking away from this conversation today, the root cause. Focus on the root cause. Oladele. You're muted.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is how we have these conversations, so we get a different perspective. Even though me and my sister were going back and forth about this, you saying what you're saying basically refocuses us. It does refocus us on what we need to focus on instead of being distracted. So yeah, we thank you for that. Okay, the first question here says, I have it was talking about in the, let me put it up here actually. Today, the Congo shares borders with 9 countries. In the southern region, specifically Katanga mining companies from Zambia, Namibia, South Africa operate without conflict, despite the diverse mix of tribes on both of the border. It then says, why then is there violence in the eastern region bordering Rwanda and Uganda? Do you believe that East African company is failing to maintain order among its member states?
I mean, okay, so this is a very interesting debate and discussion. The Katanga issue goes back to 1961. Let's set aside, because I think the question is not really about the Katanga side of the discussion. Let's stay with the Kivu and South Kivu side, the eastern side. Part of this is that some of the most lucrative mines are in the eastern part of the DRC, part of it. There are also lucrative mines in the south, so it's not just that, part of it. But part of it is that there are old colonial boundaries, and there are some disagreements about the question of ethnic borderlands. Where do the borders go? Now, the issue is none of us want to live in ethnically homogeneous territories. Nobody. I don't want to live in a country where there's only people who speak my language, do my customs, and so on. Nobody. And let me be quite clear. Nobody has ever lived like that. People have never lived like that. There have always been people I've studied this on the African and Asian continents. I wrote a book called Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting, which is, the subtitle of it is Afro-Asian Relations and the Myth of Cultural Purity. Why did I write that book? Because I wanted to argue against exactly this, that there is something called ethnic or cultural purity. There just isn't. You know, Swahili is a terrific example. Swahili is the language of many Eastern African communities and countries. It is a language of trade. It was developed out of trade in the Indian Ocean. It has words from a range of African and Asian languages, from Arabic and so on. There is no purity in any of this. Yeah, that's Swahili. It's actually an obvious example. But it's not just that. You know, there is really very few communities in the southern part of the African continent that haven't moved around at some point in even recent history. You know, migration is a core part of the African experience, like in other parts of the world. Even the idea of the old Zulu kingdom, in the south, it's not like, there was just one ethnicity there. If you go to that part of the world, there are people speaking a range of languages. It's always been like that. That's the nature of human interaction. Africa is a place of great trade, and trade happens when people move. If you take Western Africa, Islam comes to Western Africa just about when it arrives in Europe. That's when Islam comes to Western Africa. The Futa Jalon and so on, the great movement of people across the Sahara, the great traders, the camels going back and forth, the horsemen and so on. I mean, these legendary stories are about movement. And in a sense, the African continent is a continent of movement, of cultural intermixing and so on. So there are these myths of purity that get created. Some of it was created during colonial times. Some of it as a way to fight against colonialism. It was a knee-jerk reaction. It's like Frantz Fanon's amazing essay on the veil. He said in Algeria, women never wore the veil, the hijab, the niqab, none of that, never. When the French arrived, the French said, we ban the veil. French colonials said, we are not going to allow you to wear the veil. So women started to wear the veil in protest, having not worn it before. And then when the insurgency begins against the French, they use the veil as a way to cover their face, to smuggle arms inside the Kasbah. Their culture is used complicatedly. It's not a straightforward thing that is without history. It's a very complicated business. But nonetheless, today in eastern part of the Congo, in Rwanda, Uganda, and so on, there are all kinds of cultural and ethnic fantasies that are playing out. But underneath the cultural and ethnic fantasies is the desire to control resources, the minerals, the metals, the very, very, rich mines, particularly of precious metals. Precious metals, like things that go into jewelry and so on in the northern part of Kivu. There's a lot of wealth there. People want it. Rwanda has made it very clear. They are using the genocide, in a way, of 1994 to extend their borders. They want parts of the DRC for Rwanda. Now, I know some people think Paul Kagame is a great, strong, African leader. Not in my opinion. He is a corrupt, kleptocrat who last year...
No, we don't.
Yeah, but a lot of people do. Last year, Paul Kagame won his election by 99% of the vote, and the United States government congratulated him. Really, that's really democratic. Meanwhile, they are accusing the governments in the Sahel of a dictatorship. Okay, popular military coup where people are on the streets celebrating without any, gunfire, and they're saying, well, that's authoritarian. Meanwhile, the government in Kigali is, it's a mess. But I think your question, the question that was asked, is a very good question, and the answer is that it has to do with the cornucopia, the horn of plenty in that part of the region, the wealth, but also this mess of ethnic fantasy, which does play in, and particularly has been mobilized by the government of Paul Kagame to try to seize a part of the Congo.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that explanation. Okay, I've got another one here. I know the answer to this one, but this one is Professor Vijay saying Boko Haram is not real?
No, of course, Boko Haram is real. It exists. It's there. You don't need to ask me. Ask the people in Nigeria and other parts of Africa that have suffered from Boko Haram. But Boko Haram is complicated. It's not one thing. There are some real gangsters there, but there are also, it's also a movement that has a lot of followers and so on. Look, frankly, there are in Western Africa, there are some unresolved tensions that have been divided along the issue of religion between Christians and Muslims and so on. These are some unresolved tensions. It doesn't help to have US televangelist money enter Uganda and Kenya and talk about homosexuality and this and that and inflame people doesn't help. It also doesn't help to demonize the Muslims as terrorists. All of this is just intensifying the fear mongering. When Muslim communities in parts of Western Africa organize for their rights and so on, if you're going to immediately call them terrorists, whether they take up arms or not, they are going to become terrorists. I mean, it's a guarantee. It's a guarantee. If you're going to call them terrorists, they're going to become terrorists. Now, they have grievances. I mean, it is true that there are, in Nigeria, for instance, the northern part has been thoroughly neglected. Southern Nigeria, where the oil is, firstly, companies like Dutch Shell and so on have been stealing the wealth from the south. The story is well known to people, but the benefits have been in the south, not gone to the north. In the north of Nigeria, there is a problem. It just happens it's a largely Muslim area, and the protests that came, because, well, they are Muslims. That's how they began to organize. So it was very quickly seen as, again, a religious conflict. It's not necessarily a religious conflict. There are, many years ago, now 30 years ago, I interviewed Alpha Omar Konare in Mali. And what Konare told me is very instructive. Konare told me, look, I've just come in as a democratically elected president of Mali. If the US government forgives our debt, if they fight with the bondholders and say, let's let Mali start from scratch, we can start exporting our gold, and then we can solve the problem of the central belt, the conflicts with the Fulani and others. We can solve the northern problem with the Tuaregs, the fight with the Tuareg communities. And the United States said, sorry, we are not going to forgive your debt. Alpha Omar Konare could not move an agenda. He was overthrown. And today, we have this insurgency in the north where Al-Qaeda appeared, made an alliance with the Tuaregs, made an alliance with some of the Fulani groups, and basically took over most of Mali. So, it now looks like a religious conflict when in fact it started off lack of resources, inability to deal with a particular problem. So let's not exaggerate Boko Haram. It is a problem, but let's not exaggerate it. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you for that one. Okay, let's go to the next one. This one says, what do Africans in the West need to do in order to support the Congolese? Do we boycott all their products from coltan? I don't think we can do that. I think we're all hooked into that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, this whole blood diamonds, blood gold, blood coltan, these are all absolute. They are a hoax, in my opinion, okay? Because firstly, the issue isn't coltan. Coltan is not the problem. The problem is the corporations. I mean, we need to be quite firm. If you live in the West, depending on where you live, if you live in Switzerland, I would say start a campaign against, Glencore, and start insisting that Glencore pay its rightful share of royalties to the government of the DRC. You see, they will all put their hands up and say, but the government is corrupt. You are no less corrupt, Glencore. You are just using the money to give it to the government. Let the people of Congo fight their government for a share of the wealth. So that's very important. The second thing one must do, I believe, is one must be out there, because the media in the West is such nonsense, so criminal in the way they report or sometimes don't report Africa.
Vijay, I don't watch it no more.
It's criminal. Yeah, BBC is criminal. I mean, you have to be the media for your own communities. Whether you are in a religious organization or in a social organization, you go around on things like WhatsApp in the groups, inform people, be the media that people don't have access to. People always ask me, well, where's the media to learn about this or that or the other? I would say to you, go to our website, The Tricontinental, go to People's Dispatch, go to Africa Stream. There are lots of people covering stories from the ground on the African continent. Share it in WhatsApp groups. The worst habit that people have got into is to read BBC and then share the BBC story and say, this story is nonsense. They'll share the story and say, look at the lies they are spreading. But that doesn't help. You're sharing the story. share our media and say, read this to be informed.
Thank you.
Don't criticize BBC. Ignore it like they ignore us. Ignore it. Ignore it. Otherwise, you will be ignorant. So ignore it in order not to be ignorant.
Okay, thank you for that one. Okay, Nduku, I've got a couple more here before you go. What must this one says? What must Africans in the diaspora as well as the continent do to restructure the AU so it really functions in our best interests?
Before you even answer, Prashad, I'm just gonna say there's no restructuring of the AU. There's demolishing. But brother, go on.
Well, maybe we can have a discussion about that on another day. I mean, the AU, the African Union, was founded by people like Kwame Nkrumah in 1963. It was the Organization of African Unity. It was a very important institution. It was renamed recently. It's based in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. It's a complicated institution, like institutions like that. They do some things very well, some things very poorly. They are only as good as the governments that are members of the AU. And the question isn't the AU, it's who are the governments. And what we need to be thinking about is to help support movements on the African continent, to have better governments that have the guts to stand up for their own people. When I met the Senegalese government, one of the ministers said to me, look, we don't have any left-wing ideology as such that unites us. Our ideology is we want what's best for the Senegalese people. And I said to her, my dear friend, that is an enormous advance above any other government, that has been there in Senegal for 40 years. Yeah. So we need to push for governments to put the African people first. If they come to Addis Ababa, the AU can be something. What we need to demolish is not the AU, but the mentality that says that the United States is more important than us, or that Brussels, the Europeans, are more important than the Africans. That mentality, that habit of the colonial mentality has to go. African leaders have to stand for the African people, and only then will the African Union meet its promise.
Yeah,
until then, you're quite right. It's, what is it? It's a nothing right now. It's a nothing. But the AU is not the problem. The problem is the 50-some governments, unlike, let's say, the governments in the Sahel or the government now in Senegal, which is standing up for its people. Where is the government of Tanzania? Where is the government of Angola today? Mozambique? Where are they? They are not standing up for their people.
Nigeria, my country, where are they? The most populous nation in the world. Well, black people, where are they?
Where are they? Where are they? I'm a very close friend of Sean Kuti, who is a tremendous person.
It's been on our podcast before, my brother. Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah.
He's a tremendous person. I always ask Sean this. You come from Nigeria, the great land of our hero Fela Kuti. Where is Nigeria today? Where?
I'm so frustrated that Nigerians, because I'm looking for people to talk about what we're talking about. And when I'm scouring around the place, it's basically hard to find Nigerians who stand out. We've had a brother here, Amoyele Shiwore, probably another guy that I'm trying to get on. But to find Nigerians, they're basically more gatekeepers than the gatekeepers themselves. It's sad.
Listen,
it's your task. Sorry.
I know. We're leaving that one on you, Oladile. We're leaving that one on you. But to add on what Prashad was saying, the OAU, yes, is started by Nkrumah, and it is a Pan-African movement that is meant to create a federated Africa made of all the African nations. But within the OAU appears the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group. And the Monrovia group wants to keep whiteness, wants to keep the imperialists, wants to accommodate, wants to compromise. The Casablanca group is like, nah, we need to liberate ourselves and we need to federate and we need to unite against these forces. The Monrovia group wins, and after they win of the two groups, then the AU is formed. So the AU is the child of two forces, right? of the compromised group
Yeah.
of the two. So, which is why I'm saying the AU cannot be restored, the AU cannot be restructured. The AU's roots are rotting. It is built on rotting roots, and therefore, to create a strong structure, we have to stop. Again, I don't know why it is so hard for us Africans to create new things. I really don't know why. Like, we literally every day create new things with our hands. We are carving, we are building clay, we are building, but when it comes to thinking, how can we build liberation organizations? We are stuck on the AU. We are stuck on the white man. Wake up, Africans.
Okay. Before you go, the final question here, and then we're going to round up in a bit. Okay, this one says, bring it up. In the presence of the imperialist forces, the presence of the imperialist forces cannot be fought until there is unity on the continent to do so. What can be done to internally stop the violent aggressions between African peoples to start with? Okay, that's the first part of it. And then the other part says, what did it say? How can we grab the minds of Africans to work towards unity and peace and not construct another neo-imperialist hierarchy of power, but of confederation of interests?
I mean, let me take this opportunity first to really thank you guys for letting me sit and chat with you. This has really been interesting. Also, also take this opportunity, this question, which is a spur to say a few broad things, really. It's not a narrow question, yeah? So the first thing I would say is we've reached an interesting point. From the 1950s onwards, the West has been saying, we're going to modernize Africa, we've got to have industries and so on. The evidence of that is nowhere. There has really been no industrialization at all. Well, interesting development has taken place in the last couple of years. I find this very hopeful, which is the Chinese development model has provided us with a new way of thinking. What the Chinese have basically said is, look, we are driving right now enormous trade surpluses. We don't want such a big trade surplus. We would prefer, and it's actually more ecological and better for Chinese development plans itself, if instead of raw materials being extracted from Africa and sent to China to be processed, that there be industry in Africa to process them, and that part of the African trade surplus remains in Africa, rather than African wealth going to China. This is what they've openly said at the China-Africa Forum. That means that they have put industrialization on the agenda again for the African continent. Seize that. Take it seriously. Take the opportunity to build industry, to intensify the class struggle on the African continent. You see, that's what's going to give people the ability to generate wealth on the continent. You can't just generate wealth on the backs of exporting raw materials. It doesn't happen. You have to, there's been no example except the Gulf Arab states, which have got wealthy just from exporting oil. There's no other example. You can't develop without industrialization. And this is a key opportunity that the Chinese have put on the table. I would hold on to that and take them seriously right now. That's number one. Number two, the African people are already throwing out the imperialists. Again, we've already talked at length about what's happening in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. They're already doing it. Their example is infectious. Because of them, Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, and Senegal have said, French, get out. Because of them, the people in Mayotte, in the Indian Ocean, told, Emmanuel Macron, tout droit, whatever, tais-toi, whatever you say in French. And in New Caledonia, a French colony in the Pacific, the Kanak liberation people have told the French, get out. It's infectious. Now this infection has to go further. You'll notice that after he went to Mayotte, Emmanuel Macron landed in Djibouti, because in Djibouti they have a base. He wanted to go and make sure, met the president of Djibouti. In Djibouti there's an American base, a Chinese base, a French base. Djibouti needs to close down those bases. Well, but it's not going to be able to do that because there is a problem in Somalia and there's a problem in Ethiopia, and the Americans need to be in Djibouti to manage the problem in Somalia, to manage the problem in Yemen, and so on. We don't need the Americans there. Africans need to manage their problems by themselves. There are problems on the African continent, but you don't need the Americans to solve them. The Americans create most of the problems. Africans have to solve their own problems. If they don't solve their own problems, let that be an African problem. Okay,
Yes,
but you can't say the Americans need to be there because that's racist. They need to go. That confidence needs to rise. The infection coming from Burkina Faso, starting with the legacy of Sankara, needs to travel. So we don't actually need to say, what do we do? It's already happening. What I'm saying, industrialization, it's already on the table. Get rid of the imperialists, it's already on the table. We need to support the processes that are already happening. That's our role.
Thank you very much. Absolutely fantastic for that. Brilliant. Ndukwe, have you got any other questions for Vijay?
No, I am busy trying to address this thing. I don't know who this brother they're talking about is, but it's connected to the Ford Foundation. And my point I'm making is that anyone of our people connected to these foundations and is openly, this is what I was about to put in the chat, and is openly giving them credit for it, which means that the foundation has required for them to openly give credit. You must ask yourself, what are they required by the foundation to do, right? That's a compromised person. It doesn't matter how good they sound.
All I'll say to that one is basically, initially when he started Sahara Reporters, it was, but not anymore. That was a long time
It doesn't matter what.
It
honestly does not matter. I don't even know why we get into the conversation. As long as the foundations, the Open Society, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all these foundations, as long as you're receiving funding and they're requiring you to put it publicly, and you do. So here's the thing. We run the organization Bongi Ubuntu. We decide we have a project. We reach out to the Ford Foundation, and we understand that's where the money is. We understand it's our money. Let's get that straight. And we want to go get it. So we say to them, Ford Foundation, we need money for this. Bongi Ubuntu is going to say, we're not mentioning your name. We're not giving you credit. You will not be mentioned. This is reparations. This is what I'm talking about. So you mentioning their name is continuing to give them power, is continuing to give them that position of the savior of our people, and they can get away with whatever else they're doing under the NGO title. You're compromised, whether you know it or not. You could compromise that.
It's a question to ask anyway.
Either way, you're compromised.
Yeah, good one. I like that. Okay, Vijay, is there anything else? Just to run this. Oh yeah, I had something actually that I've written down here. Capitalism seems to be the go-to solution for the world. Capitalism seems to be the detriment to the world. So for me, and this is my, because when you go do this and you think a lot, you're thinking capitalism is basically detrimental to Africa. It's not going to build Africa. It's basically going to continue to decimate us. Because I can't see capitalism being solutions. Which way for Africa? Because capitalism is not helping. Capitalism basically is like our last speaker sold, is basically and everybody is buying into this hook, line, and sinker. Want to be capitalist? Basically, our institutions, everything is just greed, money driven, and we cannot continue to use the colonial institutions to free ourselves. So which way, Vijay, please?
Well, look, I edited a book recently last year, which is the Revolutionary Thoughts of Kwame Nkrumah, puts together some of Nkrumah's ideas. We published it in South Africa from Inkani Books. The more I read, and I go back to Nkrumah a lot, because Nkrumah is really the one who sharpened the machete against the stone and really created the clearest line of thinking. What Nkrumah showed is that, look, you're an African country. You want to establish the sovereignty of your country. To establish the sovereignty of your country, you're going to have to control the raw materials, what's done with it, whether you want to even extract it, who you're going to sell it to, whether you're going to process it. That's the meaning of sovereignty. You want to control it. Who is you? You is the people of the country, because you are sovereign. You don't have a king. You are sovereign. So you want to control the country. If you start with sovereignty, the idea of sovereignty, you will immediately come to socialism. Because if you believe that the people control the resources, then no small group of people should be allowed to appropriate the wealth of the country. And then you have to collectively think about what happens to those resources. Now, obviously, in all societies, in every single society, there will be people of different talents. So people might get paid differently and so on. Socialism doesn't mean everybody gets the same salary, but everybody gets the same benefits. You're going to produce a society where there are social wages. In other words, why is it today in Accra, Ghana, there is not excellent public transport? You know, little high-speed rail that goes around the city. Why is it that in Ghana, you don't have a train system that connects this very large country, all of it, or Nigeria, high-speed rail system? Why is it that leave the country, the whole of West Africa isn't connected by a train system? Today, if I wanted to fly from Accra to Lagos, most likely I would have to go out of the continent to come back, most likely.
It's crazy. You're right.
Yeah, it's crazy. So this means that your sovereignty has been compromised by private airlines. The moment you privatize things, you have actually compromised your sovereignty. A truly sovereign political project is going to lead to socialism. That's what I believe. I don't believe in socialism as the starting point. I believe the starting point is the ideas of democracy and sovereignty. And if I take sovereignty seriously and we try to establish sovereignty, we will end up with a socialist society. Otherwise, you're going to compromise your sovereignty and give a few people, the Bezoses, the Gates. And by the way, there are African billionaires whose names I'm not using for now just to be polite.
The good say is the Otedolas, the Elimelus. I know who they are, and we can say it.
Yeah. So, moment you start giving them sovereignty over the resources, you've compromised your national sovereignty. So, my feeling is Nkrumahism is another word for socialism. Lumumbaism is another word for socialism. Sankaraism is another word for socialism. That to me is a reality. You cannot advance the situation in Africa with capitalism. You can only advance Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is an ideology that leads directly to socialism. Otherwise, you've detoured Pan-Africanism into something else, into, for instance, Mobutu. You can call the country an African name, you can use African words, but you're basically selling out the African people.
So,
in a nutshell, I'm going to say we need Ubuntu.
Yeah,
we need Ubuntu.
That's a great closing point. That's a great closing point. You can dress it African, but as long as the soul is not African,
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Okay, Vijay, we thank you so much. You know, this has been very informative, very, very, very eye-opening for me. I've learned a lot today. So really appreciate me, my brother. We got to bring you back. We got to do this again, my brother, man. We got to do this again. It's an
absolute pleasure for me, okay? Absolute pleasure. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the sun. We are unfortunately destined to be in the cold areas, so you enjoy it for us all.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Guys, I'll say, please join Kumbukeni, join the Emerging Alkebulan on YouTube, subscribe to our channels, give us follows. Basically, all the information is there. You know, you can actually, you know, I'll say these are resources for people that you can actually.
Brother, more importantly, share the videos we have. Share. That more importantly, share them with everyone. Your grandmother, if you have to sit and do translation, share.
Yeah.
Anyone who votes, anyone who makes decisions on what how Africa is going to move forward, anyone with a brain, share.
So guys, please share, subscribe to our channels. Let's build up followership. Let's get this message out there. We're doing it to the colonizer minds and awaken our dormant consciousness, guys. Africans, we need to wake up. Once again, thanks very much, and we'll speak to you soon. See you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks, guys.